Hello, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. Welcome into Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We do this each and every week. Our chance to share some thoughts and make some picks about the upcoming weekend's games from a point spread perspective. If you've never joined us for the show before, here's how it works. In just a couple of minutes, we'll hear from the entire Dog Nation team. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers will have their chance to weigh in coming up here as well. And then at that point in time, a consensus is formed. We'll ask Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews if he wants to join that consensus, or as we say around here, go with the flow, and he'll get a chance to, at that point in time, share his thoughts on the big games of the upcoming weekend there as well. We've been doing it all year long. We've had a great time doing it. In fact, before we get to this week's worth of games, let's give you an idea about how our season-long standings are shaking out right now as we now head towards rivalry weekend with conference championship weekend looming the following Saturday. Here are where things stand at the moment. I mentioned Dari Payro before. He is on top of the world right now. 3-2 last week puts him at 32-25 on the year. Connor Riley and myself, we're all knotted at the moment. 3-2 last week, also 29-28 on the campaign. So all three of us over 500 for the year. Mike Griffith not far behind that, winning week last week, also at 3-2, puts him just behind at 28-29. And then Jeff Sintel 2-3 last week, but 26-31 on the year. So really anybody's ball game here with 2 weeks to go of championship, of regular season action, then the championship weekend, of course, the big college football playoff and bowl games coming up after that. So plenty more games to be picked. But Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews on top of things right now. By the way, speaking of R.S. Andrews, for as good as Dari is when it comes to making his picks, the folks at R.S. Andrews even better than that when it comes to taking care of you for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. We call this show Go With The Flow because R.S. Andrews kind of keeps that air conditioning flowing through your vents during the warm weather time of year, and this time of year when it gets cold, the heating systems are kind of flowing well. They're also water heaters right now. A lot of folks have company coming over for Thanksgiving, and that can always put a strain on your plumbing. Well, if that becomes an issue for you, our friends at R.S. Andrews can cover you on all of that as well. So you can find them online, rsandrews.com. Story after story, they can deliver smiles, and they will certainly do that for you there as well. When you find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, without further ado, let's dive in, get our picks for the week's worth of games here coming up. We will start in Athens, Georgia, for the rivalry known as clean, old-fashioned hate between Georgia and Georgia Tech. Of course, on the Georgia side of things, 11-0 on the season, finishing off a perfect run to the SEC last week with a win at Kentucky, and now trying to cap off a second consecutive year of being undefeated in the regular season as well. On the flip side of this for Georgia Tech, 5-6 on the year, but 4-3 since Brent Key, the former offensive line coach, has stepped in as an interim head coach here for the Yellow Jackets. Of course, the other piece of history of note here, for the first time since 2018, Georgia Tech will be making its trip back to Athens, Georgia. This game canceled in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. So it's Georgia Tech in Athens against the Georgia Bulldogs. The number here, a robust 35.5 points. Mike Griffith, we start for you. Georgia minus 35.5, hosting Georgia Tech. Give us your thoughts on the game.
Well, Georgia won this game last year 45-0 in Atlanta, and that was obviously a legendary Georgia defense and a downtrodden Georgia Tech program. I think Georgia Tech's got some momentum coming off of a road win against North Carolina. I still don't think they have the horses to win this game or make it particularly close, but 35.5, Brandon, when you made it 35, when this line came out, it was at 33. I was considering taking Georgia and giving the points, but 35.5 is too much for me. I think Kirby's also going to try to get some other players in the game simply because, not sure when they're going to be able to get some of these guys valuable reps against the likes of LSU and whoever they play in the semifinal. So as much as it pains me not to be on the Georgia side of this pick, I do think the Yellow Jackets will keep it within 35.5. So give me Georgia Tech and 35.5 points.
That's Mike Griffith there. Jeff Sintel, how about to you? The number is 35.5.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope this year. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose picking Georgia with these gargantuan point spreads. I think Georgia Tech's got enough juice lately. If you look at the history of this rivalry, there are not many times these past 2 years notwithstanding that Georgia was able to cover this big of a gap, 35.5. I'm going to take the underdogs here. I'm going to take those 35.5 points, and I'm going to throw up as I say it in clean old-fashioned hate, but that's just too stout a number for Georgia to cover this week, I think.
A little bit of love for the dog here, at least when it comes to the points, Connor. How do you feel about Georgia minus 35.5 right now?
Yeah, give me Georgia Tech here. I've done some forecasting for the weather on Saturday. It's not supposed to be great. Chance of rain on Saturday. And because of that, I think when you've seen this Georgia team play in less than perfect conditions before, Kentucky on the road a week ago, Tennessee in the second half there, you might see this Georgia offense shift down a little bit. And this Tech defense, they've proven capable of forcing turnovers, 7th in the country in turnovers forced. This Georgia team has shown a propensity to give the ball away at times this year. I think that could set up a short field or two for the Yellow Jackets. So give me Georgia Tech here, plus 35.5 points.
96% of Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers disagree, them on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs. Maybe no surprise there. I'll give you a trend. By now, many of you are probably aware of this. Georgia just 1-8 at home here in the Kirby Smart era when favored by 35 or more points. We're talking about against the spread here. Georgia having trouble kind of covering these 35-plus point numbers, as teams often do. Now, Georgia did cover that in a 55-0 win against Vanderbilt earlier this year. But let me make my case for why I think Tech plus 35.5 might be a relatively smart play. Now, I'll be frank with you. I wouldn't bet this on either side, and I typically would say that on all spreads of this high of a margin. But consider this for a moment. What if you're Brinke? And what if you really do think you have a chance to be Georgia Tech's head coach after the season, having the interim tag removed? Maybe the only way you could mess that up is by going out and losing by 70-something points to Georgia on Saturday, which means maybe in a game that you know you can't win, you do things possible to keep it at least manageable when you can. So here's what I'm going to tell the audience here. Watch this game on Saturday. Notice moments in which maybe Tech could force the issue and go for it on 4th down. Do they choose to, or do they choose not to? Keeping the offense on the field to try for a touchdown, or settling for a field goal try if that opportunity becomes available. Or situations like that where Brent Key can find a way to slow this game down, can limit possessions, and then get out of there without being embarrassed, at least embarrassed too badly, in a game that he doesn't have much chance to win. If that's the case, I think that Georgia would be more than happy to join Georgia Tech in that. I think Georgia likes the game being at noon. I think their ultimate goal here is to get to 3 p.m. and get the game over with more so than anything else. So understanding the circumstances here, understanding a coach on the other side who knows he can't win and yet maybe wants to keep from getting embarrassed, that could set the stage here for both maybe the under to be in play, but certainly the spread, 35.5. I don't think the game's particularly close. I just think the 35.5 is a gigantic spread. So I'll take Tech plus the 35.5 too from that regard, especially given the historic trend of Georgia just not covering this kind of number at home very much. So, Dari, there's a lot of love on Tech. I don't think anybody expects the game to be close, but there is certainly respect for a spread of this size for a Georgia team that has very little to play for. So do you want to go with the flow and take Georgia Tech plus the 35.5?
Well, before we do that, we'll just, since I'm on top of the leaderboard, get a tasty beverage here on Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there and everyone on the show.
I like that for sure.
Little Georgia right there. I love Tech here and the points. They're going to cover this game. It's kind of crazy, but if Tech were to win this game, they would actually be bowl eligible.
Yeah.
They're not going to win this game. I don't think they're going to be close in that, but I think the fight's going to be there. There were three multiple touchdown underdogs against North Carolina. I was able to come with a win. So I think there's some belief there that they can win. I think they're going to fight. They're going to play hard. And I think Georgia, just like the Kentucky game, as I thought last week, Kirby's going to be very comfortable slowing it down. Everyone's giving Monken a hard time with play calls against them. And I'm like, that's kind of what I expected to happen. I expect that to happen here. I don't think Georgia's going to want to show anything more offensively than they have to. It'll be very plain vanilla. We're going to stay in our lanes. We're going to do our job. And they're going to get, like Mike said, a lot of these backups, a lot of reps, a lot of these younger guys, a lot of reps. He's going to want to rest their top talent, get them healthy, get them ready for LSU, and then really start working towards the playoffs.
Yeah, if you told me the score is 31-0, 34-3, I actually think both these teams would be satisfied with that on this particular Saturday. And if that's the case, it's an easy win for UGA, but it is Tech plus the points, and that may be the most likely outcome for this particular weekend. Keeping it to other rivalry action here, pitting SEC versus ACC foes. Let's head to Clemson, South Carolina, where in the upstate, the Tigers will host the South Carolina Gamecocks. Of course, Clemson 11-0, ranked number 8 in the college football playoff top 25 this week. Some wondering what that means for their future chances of actually being in the college football playoff. They are at least alive for it, but probably need a little bit of help to actually qualify for the tournament. On the other side for the Gamecocks, 7-4 on the season, but coming off their most impressive win to date under second-year coach Shane Beamer, winning 63-38 in a thrilling game against Tennessee last Saturday night, and now trying to keep the magic going against their hated in-state rival. The number here is Clemson, minus 15. Mike Griffith, what do you think about the Tigers hosting the Gamecocks as a 15-point favorite?
Yeah, this is an interesting game, Brennan, because South Carolina, played extremely well against Tennessee and was able to really exploit a lot of weaknesses in the Tennessee secondary, the back seven. Obviously, Clemson, a team that still has a lot to play for. I think Beamer's got his team with a lot to play for. I'm going to take Clemson in this. I don't like laying that many points in a rivalry game, but this has been so one-sided. I like Clemson's focus. I think Death Valley factors in, even though I believe it's a noon kickoff. I'm going to take Clemson and give Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler the points.
All right, so there you go. Mike on the side of Clemson, minus the 15. Jeff Sintel to you for this battle in the Palmetto State.
Yeah, I think this is a two-score game, fellas. I think last week was more to South Carolina's good than Tennessee absolutely cratering. I think that the Gamecocks can play with the Tigers at least to the tune of 2 scores. I'm going to take those points. Give me South Carolina in this one.
All right, so Jeff on the side of South Carolina plus the 15 here in this spot. Connor Riley, how about for you?
Yeah, give me Clemson here. I think this team is playing for their college football playoff live. I think they know they have a chance to go out and make a statement. I think this defense is a little bit better equipped to slow down the South Carolina team. And let's not forget, South Carolina ran out of fireworks with all the touchdowns they scored a week ago. This is a team that scored 6 points on a fake punt against Florida. And I think that's more closely to the South Carolina team we're going to see on Saturday against the Clemson front that is as talented as any in this country.
I think Connor's right about that. For everything the South Carolina-Tennessee was for the good for the Gamecocks, the game against Florida the week before that was every bit that in the other direction for the awful side of this. But Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers showing them some love right now, 61% on the side of South Carolina plus the points here. Mike mentioned the dominance for Clemson in this rivalry. If you look at it from a point spread standpoint dating back 2014, Clemson 5-2 against the number when facing South Carolina. And the other note that I thought was kind of interesting here, doing a little bit of research in this game, since Shane Beamer has been head coach at South Carolina, Gamecocks have not won in consecutive weeks against Power 5 opponents. They've actually only won in consecutive games twice over the course of the last 2 years, and none of that coming in consecutive weeks when facing Power 5 teams. So asking South Carolina to kind of get back on its horse and doing it again for a second consecutive week in the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era, that hasn't been happening with regularity. And you think about a great deal of difference in the atmosphere. Home at night last week, on the road, early start here this week. All of this sort of adds up to Clemson for me, even with the notion that Clemson's got a lot more to play for in this spot than South Carolina does. I like Shane Beamer as a coach. I was thrilled to see him get that win last week. But against the spread here, I got to go Clemson minus the 15-point number here. That puts the flow on the side of Clemson as well. Do you want to go with the flow and take Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think much has changed in this rivalry just because they beat Tennessee. I think Clemson still owns them psychologically. They're going to own them physically on this court. They're much more talented on defense. I think, South Carolina blew their load. None of that's going to translate or carry over into this game. I like Clemson. I probably would if you could. I mean, I'm going to take them here, but if I was gambling on this game, I'd probably try to move the points to about 13.5 and pay the extra to do that.
All right, so you can obviously take a look at some of those alternate lines from time to time, and that may suit your own gambling needs there as well if you're watching this on the program here today. Now, we'll shift gears to another rivalry matchup here that also involves an interim coach of note. It's the Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa, Alabama on Saturday as Auburn comes calling 5-6 on the year, but 2-1 straight up on the field in the tenure for Cadillac Williams as the interim coach there for the Tigers. Of course, also plenty of chatter that this may be the start of the Lane Kiffin era as soon as this weekend as Auburn coach. That's clearly a distraction that kind of hangs over the head in this game. For Alabama, on the other side, they're 8-2 on the season and ranked number 7 in the college football playoff top 25. And I guess technically speaking, the faintest of CFP hopes still alive for the Crimson Tide, but they probably need a lot of help in order to be able to do that. And this will be the last data point they get a chance to use to impress if that opportunity even still exists. They are 22-point favorites here against Auburn. Mike, we'll come back to you in Tuscaloosa. Crimson Tide as a 22-point favorite. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I'm really torn because, Auburn has played good football at times this year. I mean, I remember being there when they were beating LSU 17-0 midway through the second quarter. Winning in overtime, I guess, against A&M. Their game with Mississippi State, they lost in overtime. Actually, it wasn't overtime with A&M. They beat in regulation. But losing in overtime, they've played good football under Cadillac Williams. I just feel like when Alabama's at their best, that they're probably more than 3 touchdowns better than Auburn. And I have a feeling that because this game's in Tuscaloosa, I think Alabama will be at their best. I don't think they have a chance at all for the playoff. I don't think there's any chance, not even the most remote, regardless of those rankings. But give me Alabama. Begrudgingly, I'm going to give the points because Auburn played them so tough and shut them out last year for 3 quarters. That makes me think Auburn could have confidence, but too many distractions with Lane Kiffin. He's just kind of gumming it up for everybody, which is what Lane Kiffin does. So I'll blame this Auburn loss and inability to cover on the distractions that Lane Kiffin has caused this week. Give me Alabama.
That is Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, the number is 22. How you feel about the Iron Bowl?
As the number for me is 5. That's how many times in the Nick Saban era at Alabama they've beaten Auburn by more than 22 points. And that was when you had some prime Alabama years. I think everybody plays the what are they playing for card. I think there's some good old-fashioned homespun. I'm buying what Cadillac is waxing for this team, at least for this one season. I think it would wear out over a long stretch or a stretch of years. But family, Auburn, the anti-Alabama, I think those are elixirs that can keep this game within this 22-point number. I'm going to take a lot of underdogs this week. I'm going to take those points. Give me Auburn in this one.
Split decision so far for the game in T-Town. Connor, break the tie.
I kind of like Auburn here. They have a chance to get to a bowl game, something I don't think a lot of people thought was possible earlier in this season. This defense is playing at a borderline top 10 clip over the last month of the season, admittedly not playing great offenses. But again, this Alabama team, you haven't seen the dynamic, explosive offense that you needed to see. This Auburn offense, it's not great per se. They're going to struggle to throw the ball, but I think they might be able to do enough on the ground to keep this close. And look, I mean, Alabama didn't play all that great against Mississippi State, albeit they covered in that game. They didn't play all that great against Texas A&M at home either there. So give me Auburn here, plus 22 on the road. It's a key number, and I feel they're going to be motivated enough to try and at least keep this game close.
Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers on the side of Alabama, 71% take the Crimson Tide here against Auburn in this spot. And I'm going to take the same line of thought I had for the Georgia Tech game and apply it in the opposite direction when it comes to the Iron Bowl. First of all, if you're interested in numbers, Cadillac Williams is 3-0 against the spread so far as interim Auburn coach. They failed to win but did cover on the road at Mississippi State. That's the one difference in the overall win-loss record. And I did a little bit of research on Alabama. A lot has been made of their struggles on the road, especially from a point spread standpoint. But dating back to the start of the 2021 season, they're just 8-5 against the spread at home. This is not a team that's dominating in that point spread category the way that they once did. However, hear me out on a quick, theory that could be greatly disproven, but this is the theory that I'm going with here. Cadillac Williams knows he's not going to get the Auburn head coaching job. And so, therefore, he has very little motivation on Saturday to do anything other than go for broke. In other words, try to, absolutely just be the fly in the ointment, try to mess everything up for what Auburn has planned by going out there and actually winning the Iron Bowl, taking some risk to do that, throwing caution to the wind. And the more that kind of thing happens, I believe it more kind of brings the favorite back into play here, because the more you extend the game, the more you create opportunities in the game, the more you create opportunities for the better team to capitalize on that. In other words, it's a go-for-broke attitude. Maybe it results in an Auburn win, but if they don't get the win, they probably get blown out. And so because of that, even though the recent trend data here for both these teams doesn't suggest so, I'm actually taking Alabama minus the 22. And I'm going to have something else for you on this game later on. But for now, I'll just kind of park it here on the spread. Huge number for an Alabama team that has not been good, but given the theory I just expressed, I'll take the Crimson Tide minus the 22. Flow, though, I guess on the side of Alabama here there as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Alabama?
Yeah, I'm going to go with flow. I'm taking Alabama at home. Their struggles have been on the road covering. So I think at home they're going to get that lift from the crowd. They're going to want to end this season where they got a couple losses with a pretty big win against Auburn. Auburn has a lot of distractions right now. So I like the Tide at home to cover that 22 points.
Stepping outside the SEC here for a moment with the big game of the weekend from a college football playoff standpoint, one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports as Ohio State hosts Michigan. This is a rematch rivalry game and a revenge game for the Buckeyes after having lost to Michigan last season. Of course, Jim Harbaugh had the line at the end in reference to Ryan Day about being born on third base, thinking that you would hit a triple. So there's certainly plenty of bad blood here and also plenty of stakes in mind for this there as well. Number 2 versus 3 in the college football playoff rankings. But both teams, despite being undefeated, who struggled last week. Ohio State wins just 43-30 at Maryland and frankly trailed at the half against the Terrapins. And Michigan against Illinois, not much better. 19-17 was the final there. And Michigan had the benefit of a pretty questionable officiating call on what could have been kind of a pick play with the wide receiver as a way of getting to the win there last week. So neither team all that impressive in their final tune-up before the game. But nonetheless, the eyes of the college football world will be on it on Saturday from the Horseshoe in Columbus. Buckeyes play as a 7.5-point favorite. Mike Griffith, to you on the big showdown between Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, it really comes down to the weather. Ohio State doesn't play well in inclement weather and cold weather, and it's going to be above 45. That's all I needed to see. So give me Ohio State and give the points.
So Mike on the side of the Buckeyes, Jeff Sintel to you. Number is 7.5.
Yeah, this is probably a vote of less confidence in Michigan than great confidence in Ohio State. I'm going to lay the points. Give me Buckeyes to roll in this one.
Boy, a lot of Ohio State love here thus far. Connor and I have spoken already this week, so I have a little bit of an indication he might be ready to go the other way.
Can't fake toughness. You cannot fake it. I don't think this Ohio State team is all that tough. While Mike is correct, the weather has changed a little bit and going to be a little favorable there. I just don't know how tough this Ohio State team really is, and I think we're going to see that on Saturday. I think Michigan has a real good chance to win outright given the way they play. So give me Michigan here plus the 7.5, even though they are on the road this year.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers disagree with Connor on that, but not by a wide margin, 68% on the side of Ohio State right now. And I got to tell you, as much as anything here for this week, I kind of like my pick here in this game, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to take Michigan plus the points for 2 reasons. First of all, Jim Harbaugh has not been great in terms of earning wins against Ohio State. He earned his first last year, so he's 1-5 straight up. But in 6 previous meetings against the Buckeyes, he is 3-3 against the spread. So he's done a pretty good job of keeping it closer than the experts might think, or at least doing about as well as average would indicate there on that. But beyond that, here's the other thing that I did a little bit of research on and kind of found to be interesting. Of the last 10 meetings between Ohio State and Michigan, that obviously predates both of these head coaches, but in the last 10 meetings between Michigan and Ohio State, the point spread's been a factor 5 times. In other words, the team that won the game did not cover the number. So this is a series in which it is quite possible to win the game without covering, and that gives me a little bit of cover to take Michigan here. I believe there's a chance that Ohio State actually might win the game, and some of those were reasons that Mike Griffith maybe mentioned a moment ago. But the half point could loom large here for a Michigan team that won last year and has been pretty tough so far this year. So with the idea that maybe they lose but they keep it close, I'll take Wolverines plus 7.5. That puts the flow, though, on the side of Ohio State. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Buckeyes?
Yeah, I can see this going either way. Ohio State's offense just kind of carries them to a pretty big victory. I think if they win, they're going to cover this game. I don't think they lose a close game here. I think if the game is close, that's going to be a Michigan victory. I'm going to take the points with Michigan here. If you look historically between this rivalry, they don't go tit for tat. It doesn't lose one, win one, lose one, win one. It is when you lose one, you lose for like 5, 7, 8 years in a row, and then the other team wins for 5, 7, 8 years in a row. So I'm going to go historically on the trends, and I think Michigan's about to kind of punch through that Ohio State ceiling that they punched through last year, and now they're just going to shatter it open. They're probably going to go on a run for a handful of years winning in this rivalry. I'm going to take Michigan and the points.
Another of the sport's most traditional rivalries also on display this weekend there as well, as Notre Dame gets ready to battle USC. This is a Notre Dame team that's shaken off some early upset losses to the likes of Marshall and Stanford, played much better football as of late, including that signature win against Clemson a few weeks ago, and for a USC team that finds itself very much alive for the college football playoff after a rivalry win in Pasadena last Saturday against UCLA. They find themselves as 5.5-point favorites against Notre Dame on Saturday, and Mike Griffith would come back to you as the Trojans get ready to take on the Fighting Irish. Your thoughts on the number at 5.5?
Well, Brandon, you know my thoughts on USC. We talked about that on our Wednesday segment on Dog Nation Daily, and I just think that the USC offense is that explosive, especially at home. If this game was at Notre Dame, I would have a completely different vibe on it. But I think Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in the country. I don't know that he wins the Heisman Trophy, but after watching him, I certainly understand why Georgia went after him in the portal. Give me USC and give the points to Notre Dame because the game's on the left coast.
Jeff Sintel, to you, the number here is 5.5.
Yeah, 5.5 does not scare me away. Crazy to think that Notre Dame has won 5 in a row in this rivalry, including 6 out of 7. I just think firepower. I think USC. I think home field. I'm going to lay the points. Give them to Notre Dame. Give me USC here.
Connor Riley, to you, number 5.5 for USC and Notre Dame.
Yeah, give me Notre Dame here. That USC defense is atrocious, and I think they're going to be able to do enough to score with USC in this game. And I actually kind of like Notre Dame outright to win on Saturday, even with the dynamics of Caleb Williams out there.
Strong pick there from Connor Riley. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they would disagree. They don't typically like Notre Dame very much. 81% on the side of USC here, and I made my case for the Trojans last week in a spot against UCLA. Turned out to be true. I'll do the same thing again here in this particular game there as well. Pardon me if you don't mind for a moment. Go back to 2017 when Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma lost to Iowa State on October 7th. They then rallied off 8 straight wins to make that college football playoff that year. Following year, lost to Texas on October 6th, then 7 straight wins to once again make the college football playoff. 2019, they lost to Kansas State on October 26th, and it was 5 straight wins to qualify for the college football playoff. There's obviously a knock on Riley about what's happened to him once he's gotten to the college football playoff. They haven't performed well, but he has shown an ability to get to the college football playoff. Well, right now, you're looking at a scenario at USC with this team that lost to Utah on October 15th, and so far they've rallied off 4 straight wins, including a win last week. It's kind of a narrow favorite on the road at UCLA, and so I'm going to trust them in this spot. Admittedly, that's not an overwhelming case to be made for why they covered in the game, but Marcus Freeman's a first-year coach. He hasn't been perfect so far this season. Lincoln Riley has been in this spot before, and his teams have typically played well in those circumstances. That's enough for me to take the flyer on the Trojans. That puts the flow on the side of USC as well. Dari Payro, you want to go with the flow and take USC here?
Man, a lot of history in this rivalry. I think college football is always great when both of these teams are kind of ranked and playing for something at the end of the year. I like Notre Dame and the points here. If you kind of look what they've been doing the past like 5 or so games, it's been pretty impressive on defense. I think USC is going to win this game, but I think it's going to be one of those classic USC Notre Dame games. It's going to be a really close game. Really looking forward to watching this one. I like Notre Dame and the points.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun to be sure. I think, Dari, that's an excellent synopsis of all of that. And by the way, coming up here, we'll extend our reach to the entire board here. Any pick from this weekend's games available here for our best bets, we'll do that. Before we get to that, though, one more reminder. This is Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We have a great time doing this, and we would not be able to do this show if not for the generosity of R.S. Andrews being such a big part of what we do here around Dog Nation. This time of year, when we're thinking about what we're thankful for, you better believe our friends at R.S. Andrews are on that list for us. Our good buddy Dari Payro, of course, but the entire team there that's doing great work. And if you've had them out to your house, you're thankful for them as well. Taking care of you for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. That is what R.S. Andrews is all about. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it the same day. And if your heating system, maybe somebody's told you need to replace it, well, R.S. Andrews may be able to tell you just in time for winter how you can get more life out of that old unit. So make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, board picks now. The entirety of a huge college football weekend at our disposal. This show airs on Friday night, but if you want to make a pick for one of the Thursday or maybe the early Friday games before folks have a chance to see this, we'll give you a chance to throw that out there as well. Just try to give me another one too if you can. Mike Griffith, you're first up here. Anything from across the board here in college football, what you got for us?
Well, I've been red hot in these picks, Brandon. I've got a few for you. Remember that Kent State team that Kirby Smart told us was so good? Well, they're 4-7 right now. They're 4-7. They lost to Georgia 39-22, and they're 4-7. But they're a 4.5-point underdog at the Buffalo Bulls. And I am going to take Kirby Smart's Golden Flashes and 4.5 points, that really good team, to beat Buffalo straight up, not only cover the 4.5 point spread, but beat the Buffalo Bulls. So that's my first pick, is a really good Kent State team. Now, the cowardice of Eli Drinkwitz is amazing. This guy, this is the foot in the mouth guy that said Georgia would be a measuring stick 2 years ago and proceeded to get his ass kicked. What they did this year is even worse. They celebrated Senior Day a week early so that they wouldn't have to celebrate it when they play Arkansas at home. So they celebrated it when they were playing New Mexico State. I mean, let's just celebrate it in the opener. I mean, this is so ridiculous and over the top. But the people in Missouri are drinking the Kool-Aid. They gave the guy a contract extension. I'm going to take Sam Pittman and the Hogs to stuff it down Drinkwitz's throat in Missouri. Eli knew what he was doing, moving Senior Day. Give me Arkansas. Give the 3.5 points. And then lastly, and this is kind of dangerous because I know Florida just got beat at Vanderbilt, and all signs would probably point to them losing in Tallahassee. But I think this is just a matter of where Florida wants to play and who they want to play. And if Anthony Richardson is bold enough to claim that they're going to beat Florida State in Tallahassee, he's good enough to back it up. The Gators are getting 9.5 points. Take those points. They may win outright, but I'm not quite that bold. But I'm going to take 9.5 points in Florida in the game against Florida State on Saturday, Brandon.
So there you go, Mike. 3 picks there coming from Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, how about for you as we head towards rivalry weekend in college football?
Geez, got Mike shooting hot fire in every direction. Everybody duck with his takes right there. I've got some clean, old-fashioned picks. I can't believe Ole Miss last week had a pair of 200-yard rushers, and they also had 700 yards of total offense and still lost by multiple scores. I think that's a problem. Give me Mississippi State to win the Egg Bowl by a touchdown this weekend, and always one of the most entertaining games on the slate. And Connor kind of spied what I was doing with Georgia, Missouri. I think my bookie has it at 48.5 on the over-under. Give me the under in that game.
Wait, which game is this?
And a myriad of other factors.
Wait, which game is that?
Georgia Tech.
Okay, Georgia Tech. Okay, Georgia Tech. You said you have the over and the under. I'm sorry. You caught me off guard there for a moment.
Got the under, sir.
I got the under.
Sorry, I'll insult coaches and fan bases much better, and everybody will have everybody's attention.
No, just the first time you said Georgia, Missouri, so that kind of threw me off there for a moment. But good stuff there from Jeff Sintel going under on clean old-fashioned hay, which I think is probably a pretty smart play. Connor Riley, how about for you? Anything you want from the board?
Yeah, I got 3 picks, 3 days of games, 3 picks, 1 pick from each day. I do have a bone to pick here with BA. You know, he wants to be Mr. National, Mr. Big Guy, and just betray his roots. The fact that we're not picking Ole Miss, Mississippi State here is just a disgrace to the South. I don't know how you call yourself a son of the South, and we're not picking that game, especially when, I mean, this is as easy as it could be. This Ole Miss team is all over the place. Lane Kiffin had to have a team meeting this week to declare that he's not taking the Auburn job and is too busy, you know, tweeting at reporters and coming up with fake press releases here. It worries me that I'm in lockstep with Jeff on this because we both kind of liked Florida last week and then lost out right there. But give me Mississippi State here +2. That's your Thursday pick. For Friday, we're going to the Territory Cup. We gave you Oregon State over Arizona State last week. Arizona State is bad. Arizona, you know, they got a big win a few weeks ago over UCLA. They're a 4-point favorite in this game. I like Arizona to win by more than that there. There's your Friday pick. And then for Saturday, we're going back to the Big 12 and into TCU country. They are a 10-point favorite against Iowa State. That is far too many points for a solid Iowa State defense. We know this TCU team plays close game after close game. I do not expect them to cover this weekend. I don't even know if they're necessarily going to win, but give me Iowa State 10 points. So on Thursday, you got Mississippi State +2. Friday, you got Arizona -4. And on Saturday, you got Iowa State +10.
Very good stuff, Connor. And as far as not picking the Egg Bowl, I'm picking the Egg Bowl right now, too. And I'm here to tell you right now, I am all over Ole Miss in this spot. The next end-of-season rivalry game that Mike Leach wins as a coach will be his first. The number here is 2 points. I'm actually going to go money line -128 just to avoid seeing a 1-point, win go the wrong way on me. So I'm going to take Ole Miss money line -128 just to kind of preserve the issue of the fact they might win the game by 1 point. My theory on this is that Lane Kiffin has played Mike Leach like a fiddle. He's always doing this stuff to make it seem like they're buddy-buddy, they're friends. This week, Kiffin's son was like tweeting at Will Rogers and all this kind of stuff, or texting him, I guess, is what it was. He has absolutely tricked Leach into thinking that he's his friend. Leach is nothing telling when it comes to these kind of rivalry games. Yeah, Kiffin's distracted. Ole Miss is distracted because of it, but that kind of hasn't really mattered in the Egg Bowl so much here. Leach has just had a hard time with rivalry games. I actually like Ole Miss money line here coming off the embarrassing game against Arkansas, just simply because I think that Leach is the kind of coach that can be had in these spots. Another rivalry number that I really like here, I like over 50 in Alabama-Auburn for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. I think Auburn really takes some shots. I think Cadillac Williams has some fun in the final game that he's likely to coach here for Auburn. It could result in a bad Auburn loss, but it could be entertaining there for a while. So I think over 50 is the play on that. From the Big 12, we saw Oklahoma last week probably play better than it has all year long, winning the Bedlam rivalry game against Oklahoma State. I don't expect it to last. They go on the road to Lubbock on Saturday against Texas Tech. Red Raiders, I think it's Saturday, just a tiny little 2-point underdog there at home. I like Texas Tech plus the 2 against Oklahoma. And I've only given you one double-digit spread thus far this year in our sort of best bet segment, and I got my teeth kicked in for doing so. But I'm going to try to do that a couple of times now with 2 of these. This is a strange game to take, but I like it here. Boise State minus 17 hosting Utah State. I'll tell you why. Boise State's not been good against non-conference foes this season, but been strong in conference. They play next week in their own stadium in the Mount West title game against the Fresno State team they've already beaten. But keep this in mind. Right now, Tulane is not exactly holding on to a very strong grip on that group of 5 spot in a New Year's Six Bowl. If they were to lose on Saturday, the door is open for somebody else. You think about Coastal Carolina, they've only got 1 loss. But the Chanticleers are actually 76 in the ESPN FPI. Boise State's 50. That could give them a little bit of a nod by the committee. I think Boise State's got something to play for here against the boys from Logan, Utah. I'll take the Broncos minus 17. And then the squarest underdog in the entire universe is Vanderbilt. Tennessee's playing with a backup quarterback. At my bookie right now, they're just a 14-point favorite. I'll take Tennessee minus the 14 at Vandy. So very quickly, Ole Miss money line minus 128. Boise State minus 17 against Utah State. Over 50, Bama Auburn. Tennessee minus 14. Texas Tech plus 2. 5 picks. 2 straight winning weeks for me. Dari Payro, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I like that Boise State game. That's kind of one I was eyeballing on Friday. That's a noon game. I like Boise State to cover that number also. Also, like Connor talked about that Arizona State matchup. You know, Arizona's just got their ass kicked for the past, 5-10 years from Arizona State. But this is probably the best Arizona football team they've had in a decade, and Arizona State's down and out. So I do like them at 4.5. The 2 I really like is going to be Air Force. It's Saturday night game. It's Air Force and San Diego State. Air Force is favored by 1. Absolutely love Air Force. And the lock, which I'm still scratching my head with this line, is you talked about Coastal Carolina. They are 9-1, but they are a 14-point underdog against James Madison. Absolutely love Coastal Carolina there. They may even win that game. That could be a huge payday with a money line. I think I'm going to tie that with some parlays I have to really juice that up. Love Coastal Carolina getting 2 touchdowns.
Should be a fun weekend's worth of games. You guys all watch this on Friday night. We hope you've had a great Thanksgiving and getting settled in to watch all of this, and have been in the midst of watching all this the entirety of the time. And as we said before, incredibly grateful for our friends at R.S. Andrews for making this show possible, and incredibly grateful for the jobs we get to do, which allow us to spend so much time around great college football weekends like this. So enjoy the games, everybody. We'll see you back here again next week at the same time for what will be the championship week edition of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Hard to believe we're already to that point, but that's where we are here in this season. So happy holidays to all of you. Happy Thanksgiving in particular.